Tēnā koutou katoa, ko ingarani me piripini te whakapaparanga mai, ko Lester me Bristol te whenua tupu, ko Tamaki Makaurau te kāinga, he Industry Research Liaison Manager o i New Zealand Food Safety Science and Research Centre. Ko Kyla Archer toku ingoa, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to our first food seminar spotlight of 2026. I hope you've all had a good start to your year and enjoyed the summer where possible. Livy and I were just talking about how we're expecting hopefully an Indian summer so we could keep some of that warmth a little bit longer.
Yes.
So today I'm pleased to welcome Livia Esterhazy to talk about the programme A Lighter Touch. This is an industry and government partnership to help New Zealand food producers to move away from the reliance on agrochemicals towards a more sustainable, integrated approach to managing pests and disease. And this seminar will take a look at some of the tools and solutions that have been delivered throughout this programme, which wraps up in March 2027. So Livia is the programme director and is hugely passionate about the health of people and planet through food. And she is excited to personally make a contribution to A Lighter Touch's vision for New Zealand to be the most desirable source of food production in the world. I agree. As always, if you have any questions, I will be hosting a Q&A with Livia at the end of the presentation. So please put your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And I'll hand over to you now, Livia.
Great. Thank you so much, Kyla. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Atlantic, ko Pacific, na moana, ko Lukurlis, te awa, ko French, ko Australian, ko Hungarian, na iwi, ko Nigel, toku whaipo, toku rima maua tamariki, hei whakatū, aho e noho ana, toku ko Olivia toku ingoa, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm thrilled to be here today, and thank you so much, Kyla and the team, for hosting A Lighter Touch. Really great to be here. So what I'll do is I will give you all a bit of a whistle-bound tour around A Lighter Touch and what we are doing. And why we are here doing the work that we're doing, and really looking forward, to be honest, for the questions and answers and the discussions at the end. But it's quite a complex program, as you'll see, with a lot happening, which is exciting. But just to take it back to the beginning, as Kyla was saying, we are here because we want to help growers become the world's preferred producers of plant-based food. And our plan basically is to shift the focus of crop protection, right? And use the best technology and human brains available to make that shift. A lot of the work that you'll see is about integration or new tools, biologicals, ecological processes, cultural processes, and bringing them in, which obviously has a good deal of food safety crossover, which is great. And we are about achieving a lighter touch on the environment to meet consumer demands. So at the end of the day, though, this slide explains what we're trying to do the most. So we are very much trying to move our growers away from this agro or agri-chemical reliance to much more of an agroecological approach. And it's about giving our growers tools in the toolbox to help them with that shift. And of course, if we are moving towards a much lighter much lighter approach to crop protection, some of the benefits very much align with food safety, right? So what we're talking about here is really looking at no residues in the produce, massive benefit to the growers in terms of meeting a market access, right? So market access solutions being one of the big issues of why A Lighter Touch was brought to the fore. Another issue that was brought to the fore was consumer preference. So of course, consumers don't want pesticides on their fruit and vegetables. So another reason why A Lighter Touch was brought to the fore. The other one that's a little bit more behind the scenes from a consumer perspective is the resistance management. So as many of you know, with the chemicals that are out there, our pests and diseases are becoming very, very resilient to and resistant to those chemistries. And so even though they might put more and more on, it's working less and less effectively, which really does put some crops at risk. And I'll give you a couple of examples later on. And so that resistance management absolutely means we need a lot more tools in the toolbox and integrate a much wider integrated approach to crop protection. And the other reason, of course, is that some of those tools as well are coming out of the toolbox. So whether it's regulatory issues globally or regulators globally that are basically saying, you can't use these anymore if you're going to export to our country, or even our regulators saying, we're taking this off out of your toolbox. Some growers are really faced with one or two tools for their pests and diseases left in the toolbox, which is real a stress point for them. So those four areas are the key reason why a lighter touch was brought in and why we are focused on moving growers to much more of an agroecological approach. So even when we're working outside of the biological space in the softer chemistry space, we are trialing the softer chemistry through a lighter touch with new modes of actions, but we're looking at them as to how can they be IPM or integrated pest management friendly. Generally less residuals than previous generations is what we're finding, which is fantastic. And most of them are compatible with beneficial insects and mites and also with pollinators. So we are looking at those new technologies as well, even if they're chemistry, but making sure that they're a lot softer in that space. And what we are finding is that they generally don't last as long in the environment, which is great, than their predecessors, the stronger agrochemistry pieces. And from a food safety point of view, obviously being less residual and less residues in quantity on the end products is what we're all after. So this is a big piece of what we're working on as well. And then I talked about cultural tools as well. So biodiverse planting, which I'll talk about for pest management benefits, crop rotation, use of cover crops to restore soil. Those are some of the cultural practices that we're also working on and trialing with our growers across the program. So in terms of the entire program, just to let you know, it's a $27 million program over 7 years that was a collaboration between MPI, horticulture, agriculture, and viticulture industry, something that's never been done before, which is why it's quite complex because you can imagine there are 15 different stakeholders, all with their own crops and their own pests and their own diseases and, their own seasons, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite a fun program to be involved with. Never 2 days are the same. The focus is obviously on evaluation, extension, and adoption. It's not on early stage. So what we are trialing on fields, et cetera, is not straight out of the lab. It's usually pieces that are either registered or about to be registered, and we trial them, or they could be registered globally, and we're looking to bring them into New Zealand. So that's the sort of space. The early stage lab work is done, with our Crown Research Institutes like BSI. And a big component, and one of my favorite parts of this program is the collaboration, right? So collaborating on demonstrations at commercial sites and sharing results across all the stakeholders is what makes this program a standout, I think. And I've got some examples of how this has happened coming up. So here are our lighter touch partners. Here's who's in the tent working with us. And we also, as you see, have Corteva, so crop protection organization that's really keen on working in the softer and biological space, key industries, and fabulously a merchant, PGG Wrightson as well, which is a brilliant partner to have when we are, as you'll see, focusing a lot more as we come towards the end of our program on extension. So actually, that's a good point. It's a 7-year program. Oops, hang on. Sorry, that was meant to be off. It's a 7-year program, and we are unfortunately in year 6. So we've literally got one more year to go. We are finishing up in March 2027. But fear not, because the projects that I'm about to go through and the programs, we are focused on placing them in places where they will endure. So this is not just going to be closed shop and it's finished. We need this work to be enduring and long-standing. So here are the areas of work that we are working on. So before I dive into each and give you some examples and case studies, as I said, physical, chemical, ecological, biological, but the areas of work that we work on is, first of all, that agroecological space, so cultural practices, biological control agents, and new technologies, some really cool stuff that's come through. Transition is all about minor use efficacy and trials in that space, softer chemistry, biopesticides, great pieces of tools that have come out from there as well. As we talked about, pesticide resistance management being a really key component of the lighter touch. So how do we ensure that, A, our growers understand resistance management, but B, have tools and strategies to deal with that resistance management. So they're not left with a crop that's about to collapse, which actually did just about happen in Brazil. So, and I'll get to that later. And then finally, the regulatory pathway. So working to understand where the blocks are in the regulatory pathway, because if we are losing tools out of the toolbox, how do we ensure that tools come back into the toolbox and that they're lighter on the environment and better for food and our crops sooner? Because, you've all heard that there are some delays, some time delays, and it's taking 5 to 7 years to register products at the moment, and that can't happen. So we're working very closely in this space. And again, I've got a few programs or projects that I can talk through. So with that in mind, I'm going to quickly jump into agroecological space. So here we've got demonstration sites. So this is not the only projects we've got. At the moment, we've got about 30 projects happening at the same time. But these are our key demonstration sites. So all the way from Pukekohe, where we've got onions and vegetables, all the way down to Central Otago with summer fruit and everything in between. So these are brilliant sites where we have hosted workshops and teachings. And I thought I would skip over to one of my favorite projects, which is the biodiversity project. Now, this is a classic example of the benefit of a lighter touch and one of the outcomes of collaboration. So we started biodiversity as a project. So this is all about planting biodiverse flowers, whether they're perennial or annual or what have you, inside the crops that will attract the specific beneficial insects that will attack the pest insects of that crop, right? And we did this with citrus in Gisborne. And interestingly, or unfortunately, the first year we were hit with floods with the trial, and the second year we were hit with Cyclone Gabrielle. And you'd sort of think, oh, that would have been a bit of a failure. But actually, we got enough data and enough positive uplift in that space, in that trial, that Vegetables New Zealand said, oh, actually, we're really interested in this biodiversity piece. We'd like to know more. So on the Pukekohe demonstration and research farm, which is a fabulous 4-hectare piece of land that we've been donated by the Ball brothers to actually experiment. So they've donated that land to A Lighter Touch and to this program to trial and experiment with. We've now planted biodiverse strips that are there all year round, as well as these incredible, and that's the lower picture that you see, these insectaries or these insect pods that basically provide our fabulous beneficial insects a place of shelter and food so that we can actually move them around the crop as needed. So if there's a build-up in a lettuce crop, top left-hand corner of pests, we move the insectary pod over there and it does its job, which is just incredible. And so it moved from citrus to vegetables and to summer fruit down below. And then we also found out, with all the resources that we were developing and producing out there, that Trevelyan's with kiwi fruit not only took up the biodiversity approach within their kiwi fruit, they also took on the insectaries as well and the pods and placed them in their orchards, which is just incredible. So we're thrilled with this piece of work, and excitingly as well, from a Pukekohe demonstration perspective, not only has the region's growers being taught about it, but it's now expanding. So we do have a place here in Appleby Farms who have trialed biodiverse planting, and they're really keen to be the hub and almost have biodiverse corridors across the Waimea plains, which is really, really super exciting. So it's fabulous to see this work, cross-pollinating and, excuse the pun, across many different crops and pests and diseases, and working really, really well. So if you want any of those resources, please go to our website, but it's all there. And one of the fabulous stories, that I can talk about, which was done, is that we actually also integrated teachings. So we invited, for example, all the lettuce growers in the Pukekohe region to look at integrated pest management on site and a demonstration on site. And so what we did was we sowed all the lettuce crops in, and they came in on week 1, and all the farmers and growers came in weekly to actually see the progression of the lettuce crop. And I'll never forget the stories of midway through, all the farmers were going, this is a disaster. Your pests are huge. This is going to be a crop that's going to fail. Get the spray out now. Like, they were all very panicked, these growers. And our fabulous person on the ground there, Olivia, basically said, no, 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 no. Let's wait for the beneficials to do their job. And of course, the beneficials had a farm day because they were literally going, excellent, food, fabulous. And so we can actually see it on all the graphs, the pests being up here, beneficials here, and then beneficials taking over. And by the end of the season, we had a crop that was spray-free from any form of pesticides, and it was harvested and sold. So it was a commercial crop of lettuce that was basically spray-free, which was fantastic. There's a similar project that I won't go into too much detail with, but also on broccoli, and we were able to reduce the pesticides used by 2/3. And again, the broccoli growers were like, this is impossible. You can't control the green bugs without spray. And sure enough, we were able to. So this sort of work, this sort of extension work and on-farm work is really helpful to growers to de-risk adopting these new tools, because as you can imagine, they've been using sprays forever in a day and they're used to them and they work in a certain way. And to get them to shift to a much more integrated pest management approach is a big journey. It requires a lot more than just, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm off to spray. So really teaching them, bringing them onto orchards, bringing them onto the land at Pukekohe has been a fabulous way to help de-risk it for them. And there are many that are trialing it because their minds were open, which is really, really exciting. So if I go into some other quick project case studies for you that have been really exciting for A Lighter Touch. The tomatoes project. So tomatoes a while back were actually spray-free, but then unfortunately in popped this lovely little pest called the tomato potato psyllid, or TPP. And greenhouse whitefly are also another nightmare pest for tomatoes. And unfortunately, there was nothing in the toolbox that could actually help tomatoes deal with these pests. So they had to go back to chemicals and spraying. And then, of course, the chemicals or the TPP became super resilient to the spray. So tomatoes were at a point where they were looking seriously at, oh my God, are we actually going to survive here in New Zealand? Because our greenhouses are being basically overrun and we can't control it. So with work through a researcher at Lincoln, we found a pest or a beneficial insect, sorry, that is native to New Zealand. So we didn't have to import it into New Zealand. That was here already. That was part of a family that we knew ate the TPP bug. So we introduced that into the greenhouses, trialed it the first year in one particular greenhouse. And even in that greenhouse, it did an amazing job first year. Second year, which was even more incredible, the numbers showed that because we had a family of this fabulous Engitatus inside the greenhouse already waiting, TPP didn't lift. So there was no pest pressure in the second year at all, which was just incredible. And so they were completely spray-free. And this Engitatus also ended up killing the whitefly, which was fantastic. So all of a sudden the tomato growers were like, oh my God, this is just amazing. Let's go with this. And so they've T&G, which is where the trial was held, shifted all of their greenhouses into using biocontrol agents. And we were lucky enough to go and visit on one of the greenhouses. And the guy basically said, take a tomato, spray free. We don't use any sprays anymore. Eat away, which is just awesome. So I believe from my understanding, all the large growers of tomatoes are now using biocontrol agents. Some of the smaller farms are still adopting this, but this has really saved tomatoes in a big way. So that's a really exciting program of work that we've done. This next one, passion vine hopper. So passion vine hopper is really, really tough for our kiwi fruit industry. It leaves a sooty mold on the kiwi fruit, and so basically cannot be exported at all, and means a big loss for a lot of growers here. And of course, there were no silver bullets. So our approach to this one was, how can we bring in different tools and build a system for our kiwi fruit growers to help them with passion vine hopper. And so this work, which is got quite a few tools in the toolbox, has not only brought in growers and was hugely involved by growers because of the loss of their crops. But one of the growers, for example, basically said that he went from losing 3% of his crop every year, which is, thousands of dollars per hectare per year, huge loss. And with this program of work that we've done, he's cut it back to 0.5%. So he's just an example of many growers who are thrilled at the work of not only dealing with passion vine hopper, but dealing with it in a way that's not increasing sprays and agrochemistry on the orchard. So that's really, really exciting. And additionally, they're actually spending a lot less money on sprays in the orchards as well. So there was a cost benefit in that space as well. And finally, in this space, the UVC treatment. So this is one of our high-tech pieces, which was really, really exciting. So wine grapes were aiming to reduce the amount of fungicide and the dependency on fungicide they have on their vines. Summer Fruit, interestingly, saw this project coming through and also sort of asked what we can do in terms of alternative controls for bacterial disease to reduce, again, the reliance on chemical options. So we had two very different projects testing ultraviolet light, basically, going up and down the vines or the orchard at night, overnight, because the light's quite intense, but it's all automated. So there's no driver of this machine. It goes up and down using GPS coordinates and basically blasts with ultraviolet light the leaves and the foliage and the produce. So there is nothing, no spray, nothing being used. It's just light. And again, in the first year, the feedback and the results of the trials were really, really strong. Very, very exciting. There's some modifications to be done for the one in the vines where they need the light to come actually over the top of the vines. So the organisation's looking into that. I think trialing that version in Australia at the moment. But again, really positive trial results, especially for a year one trial. So that's exciting. So in terms of new tools and resources, which is what we're all about, there were 34 new potential crop protection solutions added to the growers' toolbox so far. As you can appreciate, in the last year, things are not slowing down. There's a lot of our growers realizing that they really need to actually finalize quite a few more tools in the toolbox. So there's a lot more work coming through, so that will only increase. And more than 37 grower resources have been developed supporting extension. The last thing we want is all of this knowledge of all of these projects sitting with a lighter touch. That would be a real fail. We want it out there with our growers. So we're really focused on extending our work. The next component is around transition. So this is all about efficacy and residue trials. Really important again for food safety, because this is where, again, a lot of the work comes into reducing that chemistry on our food. Not one silver bullet. Again, a lot of our work shows that it's a combination of biologicals or softer chemistry, where needed. But again, it's quite a new way or a new approach for our growers. So far, we've trialed 121 products, and it is led by product groups or the growers themselves. So they're the ones that tell us these are the biggest pests and diseases that we're dealing with this year. These are the gaps in our toolbox. Please help. And our job is to then work with registrants or crop protection organisations to look at what's the best solution in that space. What can we trial? How can we help our growers so they don't turn to yet another agri-chemical component? So as you can see, we've done about 39% biologicals, chemicals, that's a softer chemistry, is about 59%, and physical, that's like the UVC tech pieces, is about 2%. So there's a lot in there that are there. So in terms of our role in minor use stewardship, many of New Zealand growers obviously face pests and disease challenges on crops or in situations not fully covered by existing pesticide labels, right? And this is what's really not maybe known. Many of you might know this or many of you don't, but these are referred to as minor uses, right? So this is where they actually use chemistry on their crops that's not labeled for them, but as long as they stay under 1% MRL or 0.1%, sorry, MRL, whatever it is, they're able to export it or, bring it out. Now, what we want to do is make sure that those elements are registered on label as well, because otherwise we have no idea what is being sprayed on farm. Growers are doing whatever they want to do. As long as they stay under that 1%, they can do whatever they want. So we're really trying hard to make sure that any trials, anything that we do, we help register these onto the labels and get some claims so that everybody understands who's using what where on our soils here in New Zealand, right? So it's really critical that we actually completely do this. Right, so the next one, this, you don't need to read all of this, but this just goes quickly to show you what we've been working on in terms of the transition evaluation work. These are more pan-sector, so this is where it actually supports a lot more than just the crop that you see there, probably because of the pests like thrips, for example. And then here you've got transition evaluation work that are crop specific. So very much where crops have come up to us and said, we're having a real problem with Fusarium, for example, really need your help. Can you trial these products? So everything gets published as well. So we can go through all of that. Right, so that's transitions. So resistance management. We've been working a lot in this space alongside industry, and that's the key component here. Given obviously it's one of the biggest drivers of why we are here as a lighter touch, it's also a really big driver for biological solutions and biocontrol solutions at the moment. And I won't go into all the details here, but you can read that in terms of the history of what we're doing. But June last year, A Lighter Touch hosted an industry-wide workshop, and that included scientists, registrants, and product group representatives. And we built 4 working groups out of it, where there's quite a few significant pieces of work continuing on. And that includes development of a grower or agronomist-focused RM strategy template, which is usable because a lot of the strategy that we discovered, they're so scientific. Growers and agronomists don't even know where to start or how to read them, which is unhelpful, right? When you are trying to do the right thing from a resistance management perspective. We're looking at sector-wide resistance surveillance mapping to establish what resistance screening is being undertaken, where the gaps are here in New Zealand, and the cost of addressing them. And developing educational resources, including sector-specific resistance management case studies. So examples would be, success of what is the cost of doing nothing when it comes to resistance management in New Zealand. So like a counterfactual of if we did nothing, what's going to happen to our crops? Which ones would start to really be in serious danger of failing. And so the industry discussions on how to ensure the focus of resistance management continues after A Lighter Touch is very much happening as I speak now, because we cannot have this just stop in March, which is why we brought in the industry to frame up what it is they want to be working on. And so we'll be supporting that all the way through to March 2027 and making sure that each of those projects stands on their own 2 feet and continues on, because this is really a critical component for our growers here in New Zealand. And obviously, in terms of resistance management contributing to food safety, mitigating resistance, and having growers employing good practice of resistance management helps obviously sustain the life of existing management options. But it also helps future-proof the industry to go sustainable yields despite the challenges of resistance. Right? So New Zealand growers, we want them to be able to continue to have the tools to manage pests, weeds, and diseases to achieve profitable yields, which will impact on New Zealand's supply of food to our domestic market, as well as obviously export market and food security. So agroecological crop protection and integrating pest, disease, and weed management provides the best defense against resistance, not spraying more sprays or chemicals, basically. And finally, the regulatory space. So this is, again, another big component of our work. One of the pieces of work that we're doing now is a big case study on, we're actually bringing in a new to New Zealand novel insect, basically. And it is about bioinsecticide. It aims to provide resistance to the, and it's now got out of my head, but it's for black diamond moth, basically on brassicas. There you go. And the key here is we're not only bringing it into New Zealand with key industries and doing all the trials and working with EPA very closely and ACVM very closely, but what we're also doing is noting everything that we're doing. So when a crop protection organization brings in a tool to New Zealand, a lot of the tips and tricks of how to get through EPA, is seen by these crop protection organizations as IP, right? And it's a competitive advantage for them. So it's not shared widely. So what we're doing here is we're actually making note of every single step, what we've learned through the step, so that we can produce a guide at the end of this project as well. So not only registering a bioinsecticide, but also providing a guide to help growers, registrants, product groups on how to do this in the future. What is the best way to actually help reduce the timeframes? Because more and more, we need more and more of these sorts of biological or biocontrol agents in this country, to help us, maintain our crops, but keep reducing that agrochemical approach and deal to resistance. So that's a really cool project that's obviously still happening as we speak. The other one we were looking at was the regulatory pathway, and we ended up focusing on biologicals. So early on in our program, we actually did a whole piece on not biological, what are the sticking points of the regulatory pathway, and produced a paper on that. And what we then did is looked at, if we're going to increase in biologicals, and worldwide it is hugely increasing. So just so that you're aware, biologicals are basically going to outstrip the selling of chemicals by 2040. So they're, doing this, which is a really big issue in that we want New Zealand to have access to these biologicals. So we set out to do a big piece of research internationally as to which regulators, who's doing what where, what's working, what's not working, do they have a separate path for biologicals, et cetera, et cetera. And so what came out of it was this fabulous regulatory pathway research project that is live on our website if you want to Google that one as well. And what was interesting was that the review found we have about 50 biopesticides active here in New Zealand, which growers obviously and farmers can use. But in the US, you've got 445. In the EU, you've currently got 214. In Brazil, it's over 900. It's a whole different story there. But what was really good in here was that there were 23 recommendations focusing on regulatory approaches to speed up biopesticide registration and maintain safety for people and the environment. And what's even better is that the EPA and ACVM, who from the get-go welcomed this piece of work and actually input into the brief when we were building the brief for this research piece, they have welcomed the entire piece of research that's come out of it and are now working with us to look at a couple of projects, so watch this space, to actually move them forward. So rather than, yes, thanks to the research, I'll put it on the shelf, they're leaning in and looking at ways, because they too understand this is a really big component coming down the pipeline for them that they need to come to grips with. So really excited about working with them to develop some projects in this space. And then in terms of more understanding internationally, I went to the annual Biological International meeting in Basel, Switzerland last year in October, which was absolutely fascinating. Over 2,200 people attended. It's huge, absolutely huge. And it was focused on biocontrol and biologicals. And interestingly, this is what I was talking about. At the moment, that whole industry is worth or valued at 7 billion and only growing. But we in New Zealand really have insufficient access to innovative biocontrol agents. I mean, there was some amazingly innovative stuff out there. One that won the Biocontrol of the Year award, which was incredible. It was an amoeba that was found in the thermal waters of Aix-en-Provence, which I don't know how scientists do this. It blows my mind. I love science. It's just amazing. And they found that they were able to use that amoeba against pests and diseases on some of the crops that we absolutely need that for here in New Zealand, which would be super helpful. So, you look at that innovation that's happening globally, and it's like we really need this for our growers here in New Zealand. New Zealand is not alone in negotiating challenges with regulatory pathway. There was a lot of discussions about the regulatory pathway there. If you think about the EU, for example, on its own, it's got 27 member states. And even though the EU has overall regulation, then you've got all the individual member states, doing their own regulations as well. So it's really hard to coordinate. But interestingly, what was recognized was because biologicals are, screaming up in terms of sales and needing to be regulated, regulators are not trained in this space. If you think about it, they were trained from in New Zealand, the Hasno Act of 1975, I think it was, or 73, and it's all chemistry based. So the regulators themselves, the people in there, like judging what should come in, what should come out, their background is not in this biological space, and particularly not in the new innovative space. So there's a capacity and a capability mismatch at the moment. And so there's these new blocks happening in the regulators where they might have had efficient pipelines coming through to register, but now it's being reblocked because A, the volume, and B, there's no capability. So the good news in Europe was that I was there when the EU announced funding for member states to increase their capability. So, that would be great if our government increased the capacity and the capability in our regulators as well. But everyone is facing very, different but same problems. If you think about Brazil, what I was talking about before is Brazil basically had a closed shop pretty much until one of their major crops, I think it was soy from memory, almost caved, almost collapsed because of resistance. And all of a sudden, it was a serious problem for the whole country. Legislation got changed. Things can happen when it becomes quite critical. Legislation got changed, which then gave way to policy shifts. And, now they're registering products 12 to 18 months it takes them to register a new product. Now, the con of that is that they don't have any efficacy regulations to deal with. So they don't have an ACVM, which means now the growers are starting to get a bit over it because so many biologicals are coming into the market and they don't know if they're efficacious at all. So there's a little bit of an issue there. So I think there still requires to be a balance, but it can happen, right? Regulations and laws can change to support a faster regulatory process. So, yep, I think I've covered all of that, which is great. And the final one, I will speed up, is on extension. So, as I said, a lot of projects, you've just seen a whistle-bound tour of a lot of the work that we're doing. And all of these areas need extension. And it's not as simple as just producing a guide and giving it to growers, because we're talking a full behavior change system, something that growers have not done for years. They've depended on chemistry, and now we're telling them to monitor their beneficial insects. Most of them don't even know what a beneficial insect to their crop is. So it's really, a lot of them are starting from square one. Many who are, environmentally leaning have already started this journey, which is fantastic. But it's not as easy as just delivering resource and guides. So yes, we've got resources and guides, but we need to show how to adopt and de-risk it for our growers. So what we did there was again, with biologicals, we looked at how do we raise the awareness of biologicals and know they're not just a replacement for sprays. You spray them once and we're job's done. And unfortunately, a lot of growers have done that and realized the biologicals don't work, or think or perceive that biologicals don't work, and step away from biologicals and return to chemistry when that's not how you use biologicals. You need to integrate them. You need to really have a much bigger systems-based approach. So we did this really big piece of work and tried to understand how to raise the awareness and also how to integrate biologicals into a crop protection system for our growers. And what we discovered was we did a training needs analysis. So what is the training that's required? Where are the gaps in our product groups for extension experts? Like, how does the whole system work? And unfortunately, as you can probably, understand, you have the bigger groups like Zespri and even FAR who've got their own extension group, right? And then you've got the smaller crops like tomatoes or, berries, for example, where one person is the manager, the researcher, the extension expert, the accountant, whatever. So they just don't have the time. So there's some serious gaps in how we get to growers. The other piece that was raised in this research was that unfortunately, right now, the only real extension that's happening is through fabulous organizations like PGG Wrightson, but it's not a systems-based approach because at the end of the day, organizations like PGG Wrightson or other merchants or other agronomists, they're there to sell a product that's in their kit, right? And even though agronomists are fantastic at looking at the bigger picture, they also have the pressure of their organization. So there's no extension experts here in New Zealand that are looking at the wider component for our growers. So that's a real gap in capacity in this space. So we're working on that. We've done a lot of training workshops with our product groups with Scarlatti supporting us to actually show how do you extend, what does an extension plan look like, and all of those tools again are on our website if you want to look at them with videos and case studies. So there's a lot there to look at. Biopesticide case study, again, we studied Oreo Gold for PSA and other biopesticides, but we're looking at it from an extension perspective. How did Oreo Gold get adopted so well? What was behind the scenes? What worked? What didn't work? How did we frame up with our growers and behaviorally change them towards using a biopesticide like Oreo Gold? So this was a really cool case study in terms of that whole journey. The other one is upskilling and supporting industry extension. So that's what I was just talking about before, in terms of training workshops and delivered by Scarlatti. So that's a really great piece of work. And that's continuing as well. And then extension resources. So there's, as I said, a suite of extension resources developed to support and guide the product groups through extension planning, monitoring, and evaluation. And just 3 weeks ago, I think Gina's on this call, but 3 weeks ago, we launched a whole new part of our website. So it's got its own space on our website. So if you look now, you'll see at the very top extension, and we've pulled all 37 resources, and there's more to come, into one place around extension because it's a real strategic priority. We want all these learnings in the hands of our growers, right? So just a quick summary here in terms of extension itself. So extending biologicals is as much about capability as it is about the products. So there's no use talking about all these fabulous new biological products if the grower has no clue how to implement it, how to store the biologicals, when to bring it out, how to monitor. Those are really key pieces. The other thing that we've learned as well is that peer-to-peer learning and connection has helped build confidence in extension approaches, and to the point where we've also recently, in the last few weeks, launched our community of practice, which is New Zealand wide. And again, if you are interested in joining the community of practice, you can. And we are looking at, it is already developing what are the key important areas that we need to look at to really build extension up across New Zealand. And that sharing of knowledge and sharing of understanding, what's working currently, what's not working currently with our growers, especially with AI and all the new comms, approaches out there. It's really, really important to get this right. And again, as I mentioned, biologicals extension is a long-term behavior change program. It's not purely, hey, there's this new product that can help reduce your chemistry. Try it. Here's how, right? It's a real big problem. So monitoring and evaluation as a final piece here. 9 out of 10 growers are integrating agroecological crop protection practices in their pest disease and weed management activities, which is awesome. This is a piece of research we've done recently just to see how a lighter touch has impacted the growers, which is superb. We love hearing that it's really starting to move. More than half say their views about agroecological crop protection have become more positive in the last 5 years, and 7 out of 10 are using between 1 and 3 of these practices, more than a fifth having integrated 4 or more into their system. So again, that shift is really starting to happen, which is exciting. We want it to continue beyond the March 2027 when this particular project in its current form will end. But as I said, the big projects around resistance, biologicals, regulatory pathway, those elements are very much going to keep going forward in a way. And this is a great slide to keep up to date with everything that we're doing. So take your phones out now. Make sure that you sign up to our newsletter. Very simple process. And yeah, ask me any questions. That's it from the Whistlebound tour. Tried to go as quickly as possible, but there's so much there. There is a lot there.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Olivia. Yeah, it was a whistle stop tour, but yeah, some really great understandings of the case studies that have happened, and so just really sort of helping to showcase that work.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A down at the bottom. I came up with a couple of questions as you were going along, so hopefully you'll be able to help me with them. So at the beginning, you said that you had these different case study locations all over the country.
Yeah.
Did you have to incentivize the growers in those case study locations, or were they just willing to help?
No, they're actually willing to help because they're seeing the value of those demonstration sites. So, for example, Tam, who's a lady with citrus in Gisborne, she was incredible. Hey, she just absolutely opened her farm, opened her orchard to field days and teachings because they very much understand if they're able to solve a problem for themselves and the growers around them, it only benefits their industry as a whole. So other than Pukekohe, which was a donation from Ball Brothers, everybody else, FAR already has research plots, but they have integrated a lighter touch into their, that's arable,
Yeah.
have already integrated into their system, which is just fantastic. But yeah, very much, I think, as we've gone through this program of work and people have turned up to, whether it's citrus turning up to Pukekohe Farm and realizing, or summer fruit realizing, wow, this is fantastic. Or tomatoes is a bit harder because unfortunately with greenhouse, nobody can just willy-nilly turn up to a greenhouse and
Yeah.
go in. So it's actually proving a little bit more difficult. So we're faced with that challenge and thinking through how do we extend or integrate or teach, tomato growers how to integrate BCAs into their system without them walking into a tomato greenhouse because it's it brings about all its own problems. So, but most people have absolutely seen the benefits of bringing growers on the journey and how it's slowly building out. So there are now quite a few farmers around Pukekohe who are using biodiversity planting in one area of their farm, which is exciting because that's what we want. We don't want them to, throw everything out and start on a crop. We want them to trial something. But they're all talking to each other. They're all connecting on a WhatsApp group. It's really exciting, and hopefully the same will happen here down the South Island in the Waimea Plains. So it's building momentum, which is really exciting. But no, they very much saw the outputs were well worth the investment.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. Um, with those, you're saying that some farmers were sort of, coming along on the journey. Do you have or have you measured sort of the numbers at the beginning and sort of how that has grown throughout the course of the program?
Yeah, good question. We are doing a big component of that now, actually, with respect to measuring the short, medium, and long-term outcomes of this program of work. It's hard to quantify it by numbers, I suppose, to say, okay, we know how many growers have given up part of their fields for the trials, let alone the demonstration sites that you saw. There are growers that we've had to ask for to trial the work as well, because those 8 or so or 7 or so that I showed on the New Zealand map, those are demonstration sites as well. But there are farms all around the countryside that are trialing, doing runs of biologicals versus softer chemistry on certain crops or whatever. So yeah, it's very hard to go, these are the exact numbers, but absolutely from an anecdotal perspective, we have so many more growers that are involved now that there are grower champions happening.
Yeah.
So for example, with the biodiversity project, there is a whole growers champion of biodiversity that's been developed, right? So they're coming together. The tomatoes as well, they've all seen the benefits of biocontrol agents on TPP, so they're all okay. Hang on a second, we need to adopt it. So it very much is more and more, and you do need those advocacy or those growers that are leaning forward. They're fabulous in terms of bringing other growers onto the pathway. And that's what we need as well. I mean, growers talk to growers, right? So it's pointless if one grower in one field who's growing, I don't know, maize or something, but the next one next door is growing lettuce and is spraying to hell. It'll be pointless if they don't talk to each other and go, hey, I'm trialing this, why don't you trial this as well? Because otherwise sprays unfortunately don't just stick to the paddock, they can fly across. So
Wouldn't exist.
it is, yeah, it is important that they all speak to each other, and we really encourage that, which is great, which is another output of this cross collaboration, because all of our case studies, all of our projects, yes, they get thrown into the newsletter, and a lot of growers are signed up to the newsletter, they're on LinkedIn, but we also encourage all of our product groups to enter those case studies that are relevant to their product groups into the newsletter. So it might not be a crop that they're dealing with, but it might be thrips or, hey, look at what's happening over here in kiwi fruit, and it's relevant to, I don't know, boysenberries, and or blueberries, blah, blah, blah. So we encourage that as well, so they can actually get that cross-pollination of data and intel, so that there's more and more people involved. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I've got a few online, and it's sort of related to the biosecurity and biological agent stuff. So, one of them is New Zealand's approach to biologicals is likely to be different to other jurisdictions due to the biosecurity dimension.
Yes.
What proportion of biologicals would be new organisms to New Zealand?
I would not have a clue in terms of what proportion would be, but I would know that it's been minutiae. New to New Zealand has been minutiae compared to other countries because of biosecurity and fair, right? And I think that, EPA is Environmental Protection Agency is doing its job to make sure that we don't bring another, possum like thing into the country where it obliterates some of our endemic species. And I think that's why I know that's why we are looking at the new to New Zealand bioinsecticide and doing that case study to better understand how and why, and, if we can increase it, but obviously with the safety in mind. Is there a way to shorten that time, but equally keep the security around it? But I don't know the proportions of how many are trying to come in versus how many are in. But the new to New Zealand bioinsecticide has been tough, to the point where I know for a fact that tomatoes try to bring in a new to New Zealand bioinsecticide to fight TPP, and they spent a huge, considerable amount of money trying to register it, and EPA said no. And that's why we went to Lincoln to understand from the family of that particular beneficial that was being used in greenhouses and for tomato plants out of country in the US and wherever, UK. Is there something that relates to them? And that's how we found the Ingentatus, that it was related to them there. But even though, greenhouses, you could argue, are closed, enclosed spaces, and that was still not going to work for EPA. So I think it's a pretty tough place to go down, but it has to slowly increase, I think, personally, but with that safety in mind.
Yeah. So another question here, sort of relating to the EPA. So the EPA are also keen to see softer chemistries introduced, and often what is missing in an application is the grower perspective.
Yes.
So is there a role for a lighter touch or whoever to mediate and help growers to provide submissions?
Yes, and actually, interestingly, we have done that. That was one of the most interesting things that I learned when I first started in this program was EPA had said to us, literally, the applications are so focused on the product, they forget to talk about the benefit to not only the grower, but the environment. Hey, we're bringing this in. Yes, the grower is already using XYZ. This would replace XYZ, which would take out this much crap from the soils and and agri-chemicals, and this would be the benefit. So, blah blah blah, look at this. It doesn't happen. So we have actually presented to the product groups, to the industry stakeholder product groups about this a couple of times to say, hey, you guys need to look at it. And to our crop protection partners, we've also talked to them about how do we integrate a lot more, not only grower benefit, but environment benefit, like sell in the eyes of the Environment Protection Authority. What are they looking for? And a lot of the times there is no obvious benefit. They expect the regulators to sort of unpick what that benefit is. So I completely agree with whoever wrote the question. It's not done, and it's something that we are working on to highlight to people when they're putting those papers in completely.
Great, thank you. I've had another question from a home grower. So
Cool.
the resources that you have on your website, are they applicable for sort of home growers and things on a smaller scale as well as those larger scale ones?
Absolutely, I
TPP,
use them.
day of my life.
I've got a little plot. It is tiny, but 100%. I can't tell you how many times, I've even asked because I'm, beginner grower myself, and how many times I've asked, hey, I seem to be having quite a few whitefly on my little tomatoes. What can I do? And they literally, the team will just go, can you go check out that resource? Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, fair enough. So 100%, go check out the resources and the case studies. It's all the same nature. It really is all the same nature. And, you can have your own little insectary pod that's like this big. We actually built one for the Horticulture New Zealand conference and actually had it on our stand, but it was a real working little insectary pod, not, the meter by meter thing. So 100% you can use all those resources in the same way. Yeah. In
Okay,
fact, it's a lot harder to deal at a commercial scale and make sure that you get the yields, coming at a commercial level and shift. And that's where the behavior change problem comes in. So 100% use those resources. Yeah.
great. And I just wanted to finish up by, so you mentioned around sharing the work amongst the growers. So how is the toolbox being shared, like showcased and shared outside of New Zealand, and how will this be looked after once it's completed? Once the
Outside
program's
of New
complete?
Zealand or internationally or
Yeah.
just outside
Yeah,
of a light touch?
internationally, if it's it's probably a good
Yeah.
example of some really
Oh,
exciting
yeah.
research that has been done. So yeah, just wanted to know how
So
it's
we have
it's
we
being.
have gone internationally and we've been requested. So I was requested to go to ABEM last October to present on a lighter touch because the person that runs ABEM or IBMA in Europe had been to Salinas the year before and was at the Biological Symposium the year before with us. And there is no program globally that is like a lighter touch. They're all amazed at how we are putting this together, how we've got 15 different product groups all working together. Australia tried something similar, and it came off the ground and then fell. And I think they're trying to get it back off the ground as well. California also tried something similar, and apparently it got so popular that too many people got involved and it sort of collapsed on itself. It forgot its DNA and and it collapsed. So from an lighter touch perspective, there is no program that's like this globally. So they're all interested in what we're doing, how we're doing it. And so we do, when I've gone across overseas, we've talked about the program and we've got people to link into our newsletter. So it's been shared on internet, LinkedIn, newsletters, all that sort of stuff. And then me or the team going across overseas. We went to Evoke Ag last year in Australia as well. But also there interestingly is a balance, right? Because some of this is IP and some of our growers who are competing against other growers globally for market access don't necessarily want the learnings, like the specific learnings of what we're doing to be taken overseas. So there is a little bit of a balance there in terms of protecting our growers as well. But at the same time, it's good for the planet that we're not spraying this sort of crap everywhere,
Yeah, and I think
or a
that
lot less of
probably
it.
yeah. Um, so yeah, no, on that note, I think that probably brings us to time. It's been a really wonderful webinar and some really good discussion afterwards. So Thank you very much for your time today, Livia, and for
Absolutely
joining us and
welcome. Hang on
sharing.
a second. I will stop sharing my screen. There you go. So sorry. There you go.
Yeah, so as usual, this has been recorded and will be available with our previous webinars on our website under events, seminars. So do let us know if there's any other subjects that you would like to hear about. So yes, thank you again, Livia.
You're welcome.
Our next seminar will be next month. The details will be out shortly. I'm just getting the details sorted for that. So the invites and registration will be sent out when it's ready. So thank you for joining us today. Have a good rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Ka kite te ano.
Kia kite.